And this is the Gemara based this on Sunday. Kufa, let's analyze it. Amar Shmuel said, "Cholos lachayis." If they gave chalitza to the sisters, loy nifter tzara, the co-wives. The sisters, they cannot marry any of the sisters. So it's a weak chalitza. The weak chalitza cannot extend to the co-wives. But the tzaras, if you gave the chalitza to the co-wives that you could have married, then nifter achayis. Then the sisters are exempt, because it's a strong chalitza, so it extends over to the co-wives. If the co-wife is a sister, then she's exempt. Cholatz lebalas haget. What happens? There were two Yevamos, like two women from one brother, and you happen to give a get to one of these women. Now, when you give a get to one of these women, what happens now? It says, "Ashallah, even though you will not build a house, and therefore you have to give a chalitza. You can no longer marry her. So now the chalitza becomes weaker." And if he gave chalitza to this woman, it does not exempt the tzara. Cholas lebalas again. If he gave her a get, so he weakened her ties to her already, and then he gives a chalitza. It's a weak chalitza. Lo nifter tzara. It will not include the co-wife. Or but the tzara, if he gave chalitza to the co-wife, which is a strong relationship, and you give a chalitza, it's a strong chalitza, then nifter lebalas again. It does exempt the woman that received the get from you. Cholas lebalas amayim. The case number 2. Let's say you went ahead and you issued kedushin to one of the women, so you strengthened your ties. So cholas lebalas amayim, and so in other words, you gave her a kedushin, and now you're giving chalitza to her. Lo nifter tzara. It doesn't exempt the tzara. Why not? Because this chalitza is actually weak. Why is it weak chalitza? Chalitza normally completely severs your tie. If you gave your sister-in-law kedushin, and then you give chalitza, you still have to give her a get. So the ties are not completely severed. So it reflects on the chalitza as well. You didn't completely sever the ties with this woman. It's a weak chalitza. It cannot extend to the co-wife. On the other hand, if you gave a chalitza to the co-wife, which is a strong chalitza, then nifter balas ma'amed. It also includes the women that you gave kedushin to. So the Gemara, what's the logic? Why are you telling me that if you gave the sister the co-wives are not included? Because she's considered achos isha. Bezika, because the two sisters are the sisters of a bond. That's why the two sisters are a weak chalitza. But I want you to know they're automatic in. They're the wife of two sisters, and they're just as bad as they're dragged. Which means they're considered the co-wives of the sisters of a wife who are bound to you, and we have and the rule there is that they're the same thing. They're in the same boat. The co-wife has the same status as the other wife, which is if she's a sister of the other woman and they can marry. So to the co-wife is the same thing. So how come the chalitza we gave the co-wife works for the sister? Says, so Shmuel holds ain't zika. He doesn't believe in the whole concept of zika bonding, and therefore the two sisters are not really a problem of bonding the sister of a thing. And that's why if you give, and therefore the tzara is definitely permitted, and that's why you give a chalitza to the tzara is very effective. Shmuel says yes zika. Shmuel clearly holds. We had the previous page of Machlekes Rabbi Shmuel, and Shmuel holds. We had Rabbi Yehuda says, and we figured out his name is Shmuel. That Shmuel holds there is zika. So you said you're right. In this case, the divrei mean zika comer. Very odd. Rab before who holds as yesh zika was talking about according to the Rab holds there's no zika was explaining according to the opinion holds there is zika, and Shmuel holds there is zika is explaining according to the opinion holds ain't zika. So if you tell me there's no zika, so there's no bonding, so just because two sisters, one is Reuben, one's wife, one is Shimon's wife, but if there's no bonding, then you can marry either one. So what's the problem? So why is the chalitza to any of these two sisters weak? It's a strong chalitza because you could have married if you wanted to. It's not the sister of your zakuk. You don't believe in bonding. So the Gemara, or at least according to the opinion, you're talking that doesn't believe in bonding. So chalitza to the sister also the valid chalitza. Says the Gemara. I understand that. Let's say the second, if you get the second sister that became available to you, and and her co-wife as well does not get exempt the chalitza of Rachel. I understand why, because the Rachel's chalitza the weak chalitza. Why? Because once you gave chalitza to Leah, Leah is the older sister. If you gave chalitza to the older sister, even though there's no bond between the two, once you gave a chalitza to the older sister, you cannot marry Rachel, the younger sister, who's married to the other brother, because she is the sister of a chalutza. She's the sister of a divorcee. Midrabban, you can't. Okay, so you cannot give the chalitza to Rachel, and therefore the co-wife, it's a weak, you cannot marry Rachel, so the chalitza you're giving is a weak chalitza, so obviously you cannot extend to the co-wife. I understand that. But regarding the first one, Leah, you could have married Leah. If there's no bonding, you could have married Leah. So if you could have married Leah, it's a strong chalitza. So if you gave chalitza to Leah, it should also include the tzara, the co-wife. Why do you say it doesn't? So Bishlem and Tzara Rachel, the younger wife, the second wife, I understand why over there it's a weak chalitza, like the potter, it doesn't work. They keep the challah for Leah. First you give chalitza to the older sister. Now, you want to give chalitza to the younger sister who came to you from your other brother. It's a weak chalitza, because it cannot turn into a marriage, because she's a sister of a chalitza. I understand that. So therefore, her co-wife also cannot be included in that chalitza. But the first case, Elatzara de Leah, when it comes to Leah, the older one, you had a choice. You could have married her because we don't believe in this bonding thing. Tipata, why Taka didn't the chalitza include the co-wife? He must be right. My loy nifter tzaras nami. When we said that if you give a chalitza to the sister, it does not include the co-wife. We're talking about the younger sister. They come out Tzara Rachel. We're talking about the younger sister. Says the Gemara Tzara is coming. You use the word plural. Tzarais. Tzara is the alma. We're talking about in general. With co-wives. We weren't talking about this specific case. So if so, Gemara has a question. If so, cholatz letzaras. If you gave chalitza to the co-wives, nifter achayes. You're telling me, but you said the reverse. If you gave the chalitza to the co-wives, it's a much stronger chalitza because you could have married them, and therefore it exempts also. And according to you, we're talking about Rachel, exempts Rachel as well. So it's not so simple. If Rachel can't marry because of chalitza, neither could you marry her co-wife because she is the co-wife of someone you cannot marry because of chalitza. So either way, it's a weak chalitza because you couldn't marry either of them. Says the Gemara, how can it work? But now we learned you're not allowed to marry the co-wife of a relative of a chalutza. If Rachel is a sister of a chalutza, then this co-wife is the co-wife of the sister of a chalutza. You couldn't marry her either. So the chalitza to the co-wife is just as weak as the chalitza to Rachel. So that makes no difference which way you go. It doesn't include the other person. So Gemara says, you're right. Shmuel Nami Kamar. When he's talking about it, you thought we're talking about the same person. No, we're starting off with Leah, and the co-wife are talking about Leah. We're talking about beginning and not beginning. This is what he's saying. If you started with the sisters, if you started with the sisters, which means if you started first with Leah, and then Rachel became the sister of a chalutza, then you cannot go lo yigman b'tzaris. You cannot go to what do you call it? To then finish and go to Rachel's tzara. If you did Leah first, and now so that marriage is good, they're both free now. And now you go to the other sister, and you want to jump instead of Rachel, go to the co-wife. You can't do that because the co-wife is just as bad as Rachel. She's a relative of the sister of a chalutza, and the chalutza will be weak. So if you give her, you have to give Rachel separately. Now we learn you're not allowed to marry the co-wife of a relative of a chalutza. So that's what he's saying. You can't. However, he's chil betzaras. If let's say you first gave. Let's say, the co-wife if you gave the co-wife of Leah, so Leah herself is not a chalutza, she's just free because Reuben was taken care of. So then you can go to Shimon, and you can even go with Rachel. It'll be now you could marry Rachel because there's no zakuk anymore. There's no achleis chalutza because the one who received chalitza wasn't Leah, it was the other wife, and therefore because it's the other wife. Therefore, it's that's what he meant. Then you can go to Rachel, and Rachel will include the tzara as well. Yigmar abba chayis. Now we learned mutarad. We are permitted the kroivas tzaras chalutzase. If the co-wife of your chalutza and your relative, in other words, my sister was the co-wife of a chalutza, that's not a problem. So Rachel can marry now the brother because we never believe the bonding. So then it's a strong chalitza, and you can include the co-wife. That's what he meant. The way you learned in the first place. He says that what he's saying is why if you give to the sisters it does not work for this what do you call he said that Shmuel is talking about what he said before. He gave first chalitza, not the way you said he's chil below his chil. If you started with the tzara, he gave to the sisters chalitza, and therefore the tzaras are not exempt. And the reason is because there is bonding, and therefore because there's bonding, we cannot marry either one of them. You cannot marry one of them. It's a weak chalitza. and neither of them you can marry. So they were neither chalitza is strong, not Rachel, not Leah, and therefore if you gave them a chalitza, it won't include the co-wife. And but if you gave chalitza to the co-wives, it does exempt the sisters. You asked a question, but isn't we learned the din that if you're the co-wife of a sister of a zakuk, it's also you're not allowed to marry her. So it's as if she's the sister of the zakuk, so therefore it's a tzaref, is the chalitza is as weak as well. So we're saying here is that zikah, the whole idea of zikah is only rabbanon, and because the whole idea of zikah is only rabbanon, it cannot turn the tzara into an erva and say, oh, you cannot marry that it's a weak chalitza. That far we won't extend. So Amar Rashi, look at Amr. The whole notion of zikah is not strong enough to treat that the tzara should be like an erva, and therefore the chalitza is weak. That far we don't say. So if you chalitza to the tzara, it's good enough. Second about Tanya Kavas is Ravashi. We look like Ravashi. If you gave chalitza to either of the sisters, like nifter tzaras are not exempt to the co-wife. But if you gave to either one of the co-wife, nifter achayis. My time, what's the possible reason is La Mishum the Ksavri holds Yesh Zika. We do believe in the concept of Zika that both each sister is a sister of a Zika, so you cannot marry either of them. And because you cannot marry either of them, the chalitza is weak, and therefore the chalitza does not extend to the co-wife. But the Zika is not strong enough to say that it treats the other one like an erba as well, and therefore the co-wife as an erba, and therefore the chalitza is weak. Even though we don't want you to marry the co-wife, but it doesn't make the chalitza weak at all. I can give you another shot. Maybe who's the author? Maybe this din is based on Beishamai, who was before. And if you give the Beishamai says that he doesn't believe in the whole concept of tzaras. Those things as tzaras, co-wives of an erba or anything else. So what if you're the tzara of someone whose sister is two sisters? Doesn't matter. Tzaras are permitted. In fact, he said that if one of the women is an erba, the other tzara can go ahead and has to marry the brothers. So then you move on. Why you will living it only chalitza for the co-wife? According to Bishama, the co-wife is allowed to marry one of the brothers. So what it says, that part is like Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri. Remember, Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri tried very hard to stop this. He wanted to make it uniform for everybody. He said, you know what? Let's not do any marriage. Let's only do chalitza. Because according to Beis Hillel, if Reuven's wife, who has no right to marry Shimon, because she's the tzara of an erva, if she marries Shimon, the children are mamzedim, because it's the isa of marrying a sister-in-law. So Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri says, you know what? To accommodate everybody, let's just give chalitza. According to Beis Hillel, who cares? He gave chalitza to a woman that didn't need it. And according to Bishami, she received the chalitza. She's a free woman now. That's why we give chalitza here. Says Rabbi learned, speak never had a chance to carry out his intention. You're right. In his generation, they couldn't carry it out. But after his generation, the next one, they carried it out. And therefore, that's what he's saying over here, that if you give chalitza to the sisters, the tzaras is not exempt. But if you gave chalitza to the tzaras, is good, because the tzaras are not in any way connected to the sisters. According to Bisham. Second further, who have a question, interesting question. Now that we're talking about strong chalitzas and weak chalitzas, introduce us to the whole concept of massive questions. What's stronger? There were two. Reuven died. You had two wives. You went to one wife. Reuven is stronger. You went to one wife and you gave her a get, and the other wife you gave her kedushin. Now, once you give a get, you really cannot marry the other wife anymore because it says asher lo yivna. So what you went in the other order. First, you gave kedushin to one of the wives. And then you went ahead to the second wife and you gave her a get. The moment you did that, you can no longer marry the first wife you gave kedushin to, because you just said to the brother, I'm not planning to build anything with this household. And so the question is, which one should you give the chalitza to? Which is appropriate? Now you have to give chalitza to both. Which one do you give chalitza to? And or you give chalitza to one of them and exempt the other one. Which is the stronger one here? Do we say balas get hadif? Do we say the stronger one here is the one who received the get? You already gave a chalitza, so therefore you started severing your ties, and therefore, maybe the balas get, because since you started with her, so you should give her the chalitza as well. You already gave her a get. You sort of cut some of your ties. So continue and give her the chalitza. She's the better one. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe the one you gave kedushin to, since you strengthen your ties, the krei will be it. You made her closer to you, and therefore the chalitza you're going to give her is a stronger chalitza. and because it's a stronger chalitza, even though it's only Rabbanon that you got closer to you, it's a stronger chalitza, and therefore that's the more effective one, and that will cover both. It says the following: we have there's an argument between Chachamim. What happens if there were two wives to Reuben? Can you give one wife a get, one of the women a get, and the other woman a get, or you cannot give two get and not? So the Chachamim say you can give one get to one wife, another get to another wife. You can give one maimet to one wife and another maimet to another wife. And the Gamil argues. He says once you gave one get, that's it. However, Gamil's maidish, she has get achamayim. If you gave, let's say, Rachel and Leah, both married to Reuben, you gave Leah, what do you call it? A maimet kedushin. You can then go over to the other woman, to Rachel, and give her a get. Or a maimet acha get. If you gave one of them a get, you can give the other one. If it's two different women, you can give them both. Now, if you can tell me get odiv, if you can tell me that that get is better, it's stronger, you've severed your ties, how can you then go give kedushin to the other one? How can you give kedushin to the other woman? You already cut your ties with Reuben. Remember, it's one Reuben. It doesn't matter two women. It's one Reuben. You already sort of severed your ties somewhat. How can you now go and rebuild the ties? You already did. If you can tell me that about the other way around, that maimed is stronger, giving kedushin is stronger. So how to get about it's too late to give a get to the other woman afterwards. It shouldn't be effective at all. That doesn't prove kihadodin. They're both equal weight. That's why if you did the two separate women, one get and one maimed, they're both effective. Shmamino. Good proof. Is the name of that. Beis achoyes Yevamos. You have two sisters who are Yevamos. Shenaflu lifnei Yavam. You have two sisters who are Yevamos that fell before Yavam. So there's Reuben and Shimon that died, and each one married a sister. And Levi now is her surviving brother. Is if he went ahead and he gave chalitza to the first wife, let's say Reuben's wife, Leah, and Shimon married Rachel. If he gave, let's say, chalitza to Reuben's wife to Leah, hutra, then she becomes, now she's permitted, right? She's free. She had her chalitza. Then later on, Shimon died, and now Leah, the other woman, Rachel, came available. Hutra, and then again gives her chalitza. Hutra, she becomes mutter again. Right, because now he has to, because she's not a chois kukasa, or because she's only a chois chalutzasa, the sister of the one you gave chalitza to, so you give her chalitza as well. What about Mesa? What about Mesa Rishayna Mutter B'Shnia? What happens? Let's say Leah, Reuben's wife, died before you had a chance to give a chalitza. So when Shimon dies later, he can marry Shimon's wife, even though it's a sister of Leah. So what? Leah is no longer around, so it's no longer the sister of who you had a bond with, because no bond to Leah, and nor is she the sister of one you gave chalitza to, because Leah died. You never gave her chalitza, so there's no problem. Now the chiddush is, even though when Leah, we're talking about that Leah died after Shimon died. So Shimon died. As soon as Shimon died, you couldn't have married Rachel, because Rachel was the sister of Leah, right? So you couldn't marry her. But a month later, Leah died. So now suddenly, even though it was usher for a month, now it became permitted. She's no longer the sister of the one you had a bond, and nor is the sister of one you chalitza. You never gave a chalitza. So therefore, Mesa Rishayna Mutter was a while, doesn't deter me because it's gone now. They say the age of limit. Surely Mesa Shnia. If the second one died, Rachel died. The first one was never. The first when Reuben died, let's say for 2 months before Shimon died, you could have married Reuben's wife. There's no problem. You just didn't. And then Shimon died. So okay, for 2 months you were allowed to marry Leah. Then Shimon died, you could no longer marry Leah because it's the sister of Yizakuk. And then if Rachel died 2 months later, then Leah goes back to her first heter, which was permitted in the first place. So, and that's no chiddush. For sure you're allowed to. The chiddush here is that even the other way around. When Shimon died, Leah was still alive. When Shimon died, Rachel was forbidden to you. For the moment that Shimon died, she was still forbidden to you because it's the sister of Yizakuk. Then Leah died, and the chiddush here is that now Rachel is permitted to let him marry her. So that's what Rav says. Should have the Yava, and the reason is because Yevamos Shahutra Vama that was permitted, the Nessa became forbidden. This is the case where Reuben's wife first was permitted, then became forbidden. The Chazra Vahutra, then when Shimon's wife died, it became permitted again. Tachzat Edition goes back to first head. So Rav holds no difference whichever way, it's all right. Rabbi Yechida says, no, I disagree. I hold only this case. Mesa Shnia, if Rachel dies, then Mutter B'Rishayna, yet I agree, you're allowed to marry Leah now because Leah started out being permitted, then became Asa when Shimon died, then became permitted again when Rachel died. Mutter B'Rishayna, but Mesa Rishayna, but if Leah died, Asa B'Shnia, you can never marry Rachel because as soon as Shimon died, that moment, you couldn't have married Rachel because it was a sister of Yizakuk. And that Issa remains. Because my time is you call Yevamos any Yevamos that do not read Shosh and Philip while it happened. Yevamos Yavilah can marry her. Treat as if since at the moment Shimon died, you couldn't have married Rachel because Rachel had a sister that's in waiting. So therefore, it's as if Shimon had children and it's Asa. Once that happens, the Issa remains forever, it never disappears. Says Rav, let's say Rav doesn't agree with that logic that if it started out Asa, it's Asa forever. But didn't Rav himself say? Any woman that when her husband died, I don't read this rule that that I could have married her had a case of we treat it just like a woman that that had children and therefore it's also forever. Says the Gemara, you can't compare the two. In the case that Rav said that was that Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven was married to one sister, and Levi was married to, and Reuven was married to one sister, and Levi was married to the other sister. And so what happened was when Reuven died, Levi could never have married that thing because it's a sister of his wife. And so Rav said since, and then what happened was that Levi's wife died. So the question is, can Levi now marry Reuven's wife? Can Levi marry Reuven's wife? Now, true, when Reuven died, he couldn't have married Reuven's wife because he was married to Leah's sister Rachel. But a month later, Rachel died. Can Levi now marry Leah? So Rav said, no, once it started out Ba'asar, you cannot revert. So what's the difference? There was a big difference. Where is it? Hani Mili, you know when Rav said this, in that case, Levi couldn't marry Reuben's wife Mahatayra because he was married to the sister, to Rachel. And to marry Leah would mean he would be married to two sisters. That's also for the Torah. So since there's an Issa in the Torah for 5 minutes, that Issa never disappears. Over here, when Reuven died and Leah was available to Levi, all it was is when Shimon died, all it was is Achay Zikr. When Shimon died, Rachel's Isser, the reason why Levi couldn't marry Rachel is because she was a sister of somebody who was bonded to you. That's only an Isser Rabbanan. So he says if Leah dies afterwards, that Isser disappears. It's a weak Isser, so it can't disappear, even though it started out in the first place. Okay, H was a question. It says we look now, Mishnah just now. Our both Achi, 4 brothers, based on him the same is Reuben and Shimon married to Leah and Rachel. Umeisu is Hanasuin. They both died. So now you have Levi and Yehuda. Neither of them can marry either sister because each one's a sister of a bonded one. We tell both to make chalitza. Now, a question to Rabbi Yechanan. Now, why it isn't a question to Rav, so the Rishonim have a discussion. But it's a question to Rabbi Yechanan. According to Rashi, the questions are Rav as well. A very simple solution. Why don't we say to one of the brothers, go ahead, give chalitza? Why don't we say to the second brother, say one of the brothers, surviving brothers, give chalitza to the second wife, the second one, so she's gone, and she's out of the picture. And therefore Leah, who was mutter in the beginning, and then became Asr, now should become mutter again. So why do you say they both have to have chalitza? The second one can always get married. So let one of the brothers give chalitza to the second wife, the one who started off Isa, to give her chalitza. The tevet is shaying in the gabigidach. Let the first one be for this one ki yevama shehuta, like a yevama that became permitted. The Nesra and then became forbidden, and the Chazavut became permitted again. So let the other brother marry Reuven's wife. It's not the sister of a chalutza because you didn't give a chalitza, the other brother gave a chalitza. So let you marry Reuven's wife because she was mutter, so Reuven died, and then a month later Shimon died, became Asr, and then now that Shimon's wife died, she's mutter again. Tachla Teirishon. Amalek said, you know what? You're right. Good question. Achayes, this Mishnah about the sister we just learned, ain't it a Mishnah? I don't know who the author is. Says the Gemara, why didn't you give a simple answer? The lay Malay, Abichna could have answered. Those Abichna, I have no answer. I'm stumped. So the Gemara asks now a series of questions. Why didn't you just answer this and resolve everything? For example, the lay Malay should have said, my chotz is not. It says chotz is chotz. It doesn't mean cheletzes It doesn't mean give chalitza to both. It means give chalitza to one of them, to the second one, and the first one you can marry. Says the Rabbi Yechon is not happy with that because the Mishnah says clearly in plural, he give them both chalitza. Neither of them could marry. Says the Gemara, why do we answer? Like we said before, my chalitza. You know what it means chalitza? Not both of these women, but chalitza dalma. Generally, if this case ever arises, this is what you do: give chalitza. Says the Gemara, how luktani. It says these. The lema, let us say, the chalitza le'rishayna bereisha. So he should just answer that give chalitza to the first one. So why don't we just like this? Give chalitza to the first one, and then the second one is never permitted because the second one will be a sister of a chalutza, and therefore you don't even need to give a yibum at all. No, sorry. Let us say the reason why the Mishnah says over here chalitza is because by mistake you gave chalitza to the wife of Leah, forget the first one. So what do you have remaining? Only Rachel. But Rachel was never permitted because the moment Shimon died, Rachel was not permitted because her sister Leah was around. So that's why the Mishnah says you have no choice. So the first one you gave chalitza to already, and the second one go ahead and give chalitza to because you no longer have a choice. It's not talking about a case where you have a choice, and therefore we're asking why didn't you just give chalitza to the second and the first one permitted? Says the Gemara, you know why Rabbi didn't answer that? Because chol says lechat chilik tani. It says clearly Mishnah chol says you haven't done anything yet. What should you do when we're telling you give chalitza to both? So the answer is simple. We're worried. You're right. Give chalitza to both. You know why? Because we're scared you'll make a mistake. People don't understand the difference. What's the difference if I give chalitza to the older one first, to the younger one first? They don't understand. We are worried. They might give chalitza to the first one, to Leah, and thinking I can marry Rachel now because they don't understand the difference. So Gemara says no. It says in the Mishnah clearly there is no yibum here. The lekadin yibum hachaklal. Not that we're worried. The way you're learning is you want to say there is a mitzvah yibum, but we can't do it practically speaking because mistakes will arise. That's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says chol choice v'loy misyavmas. There's no din of yibum at all in this case. Makes no difference which one you want to give chalitza first. The lema, let answer. You know what? You're right. You know why we don't want to do it? We're scared that if you are going to go ahead and marry, let's say one, and then you will die, and you will not, and the other brother who's going to do chalitza for the other wife is going to die, and there won't be anyone, and you cannot, it's a sister of the one that you marry, and therefore you cannot, and we don't want to take away the mitzvah of Yevamim. Says, you know, Rabbi Yechon, the Mishnah Chayim, Yechon, not worried that one of the brothers died. They're young, we're not worried at all. So, just two more lines. He could have answered very simple. This follows, our Mishnah follows Rabbi Lazar. The Amadi says, he disagrees, he holds, Kivan Sha'amda Olav Sha'achas, he believes, we'll see later in the Gemara. He doesn't care if 1 minute you're Asr, he said the Isser never disappears. Even if you were Mutter 5 minutes, and then you became Asr for 1 minute, that Isser remains forever. So maybe that's the Pshat in the Mishnah. That's why you cannot give chalitza to either one. The Isser Netzel Lamis. When I answer him in the Sefer of Lazar, they should have Rabbi Lazar, because in the Mishnah itself, Rabbi Lazar comes along and talks about Besham Mesil. So obviously Rabbi Lazar is not the author of the beginning of the Mishnah. We'll stop here. Have a